Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Hello, this is Michael Feeley, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Well, here we are on another Paranormal Dimensions show. I've got a fantastic guest again for you today. It's Michael Feeley. Now, Michael's been... he's been doing lots of work on the pyramids or ancient architecture and the secrets of ancient codes and everything. Honestly, it's going to be fascinating. This has always fascinated me. I think how it started out, he's an ex-police officer and his wife, Sarah. They experienced a spiritual awakening of a lifetime in 2009 when they relieved a murder of a Victorian teenager. Whether we'll actually get into this, I don't know, but I will actually be having some links on my site, on the Paranormal Dimensions site, if anyone will be interested in that. But I'll let Michael lead on to that if he'd like to tell us something about that. But anyway, I'm going to introduce Michael now, and we'll go from there, and this is going to be fascinating. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's fantastic to have you on, and thank you for agreeing to come on. I think it's going to be, as I said, fascinating. It's always fascinated me, the ancient pyramids and the Stonehenge and everything. I think you just did a trip to Stonehenge at the weekend, didn't you?
Absolutely. It was just yesterday. What a fantastic day, and people took pictures of UFOs, and
really?
it was a special day. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's amazing. I know. I saw some pictures, and it was a lovely sunny day. I know. It looked cold though.
It was because it's the Salisbury Plains. There's no sort of building lines to stop the wind, so the wind was. It was sunny, but it was freezing cold.
Yeah, it did look a bit cold. I saw people sort of all hunched up in their big coats and their gloves and everything. Anyway,
including me, and I don't feel the cold ordinarily.
No, I know what you mean. You do get used to it, don't you? After when you do so much of it, I know. I don't know if you want to tell us anything about how you started out with what I was just mentioning about in 2009, your experience with the Victorian teenager.
Yeah, well, that's really for me. Where the major start really happened, and as you said quite rightly at the start, I was a police officer in two of the UK's biggest cities, frontline officer, where I dealt with all levels of crime. Being the first on scene to a hostage situation, being the first on scene to a murder, or it could be something mundane like the first on scene to a shoplifting. But I sort of dealt with the complete wide spectrum of everything over 17 years. But I also dealt with a lot of investigations and investigative works, and I do have a very sort of investigative, intuitive mind. And when you've worked in law enforcement and evidential gathering for 17 years, you then you seem to have an eye to be able to piece evidence together and make connections that maybe some people can't. But certainly towards the last 12 or 15 months towards my career, I was becoming very, very disillusioned with what was happening. And around that time, there was lots and lots of what you would deem paranormal things happening to me as well. It started briefly before this Victorian teenager, where I'd go on a city break to Rome and see strange and orthodox things in the sky. There'd be certain snippets of things that I was sort of being built up. But the story of the teenager, the Victorian teenager, really was inherited from my wife's past, and where she lived as a child used to be Victorian farmland. And many mediums in the family and mediums that she'd seen throughout her life basically told her that there was this girl around her that actually looked strikingly like her. And this girl had been taken, and I quote, by the hands of another. Now that really can only mean one thing. But she sort of lived with it, and children who used to go and play at the house would go upstairs to play and come downstairs and say, you know, can you go into that little girl? I don't want to play anymore. But there was no one else up there. And obviously, you know, it was sort of a spooky type of house, sort of kind of area. Yeah. But nevertheless, when I sort of got together and we got together, I sort of inherited. And we both went to see the same medium who my wife had seen, you know, many years earlier. And independently, she basically told us that there was this girl around. She actually named her and said that she wanted us to investigate and look into her death because it had been covered up, and she was a bit due to unfinished business. She was refusing to leave, you know, the realm that she's now stuck in. So we agreed. You know, we both police officers. We agreed. We didn't have a particular time or a date of the event. We didn't necessarily know what had happened. But we went to our sort of city central library, and because we had a name, we looked at every sort of death from the modern day, which was 2009, and we went all the way back to the Second World War, because again we didn't have any specific date, but we thought where my wife's house and estate was, that would have been built round about that time, so we'll go back that far. But we couldn't find anything, and we literally spent all day looking through the records based on the name that we had, and we couldn't find anything. So I think the next day we went and had a private lunch, which we thought was private, and there was literally just myself and my wife there, and we were just discussing, saying, look, what is this now serving? You know, we've gone as far as we possibly can. We've done as much as we think we can. We don't have a date. You know, what we're going to do. I think the best thing to do is to call it a day. From that point on, things took a really, really negative turn. And we got on from that Sunday lunch and we walked into the house, and as we walked in, the radiators switched themselves off and the house was freezing cold. It was, that particular afternoon was extremely eerie. I'd had something attempting to possess me. We'd had, leading up to that, we had in our living room, we had a 6-foot double glazed window, and that had just shattered from the inside. It's almost like a poltergeist activity. It was sort of a real negative turn. So I sort of found the medium up and said, look, you know, this is now, you know, last time we saw you, you offered to help us. We declined at that time, but now we would like some help because it's getting, you know, uncomfortable. So she said, well, yeah, I'll you know, if you, I've got no car, but if you can come and pick me up, bear in mind it's only like a 30-40 minute drive from where we lived. If you come and pick me up, I'll come and help you in the morning, which would have been the Monday morning. So, I said to her, well, while I'm on the phone to you, actually the house has gone back to normal. It's gone okay again. And the medium says, yeah, that's because she's with me. And she's basically saying that you promised to help and you haven't. And it was basically, that this girl was 14. She was from, I didn't know at that particular time still, but it was from Victorian England in the year 1850. And that is really why we hadn't actually found anything in the records, because we'd only gone back to the Second World War. Oh, I see. But she said, so yeah, because we didn't have any date. So nevertheless, we carried on. We said, okay, well, you know, we're going to get some help tomorrow. What can go wrong? You know, it's literally now sort of mid-afternoon. We'll stop here. We'll get it sorted tomorrow. And we then later on in the evening, began to smell flowers in the house, and things started to happen that again made it uncomfortable for us to be there. And we had to leave our house because it was very, very uncomfortable, and there was a strange sort of eerie, haunted, horrible feel. And we made the 30-minute drive to the mother-in-law's house, because she had some kind of understanding of this story, because she'd been it's obviously in the same house as my wife, as her mother. So we went over there, about 1:30 in the morning. We went to bed. It was a ground floor sort of garage conversion. We slept there. About 3:30 in the morning, which was then February the 9th in 2009. I remember being taken back to what I would describe, and I can remember vividly, as if I'm still there. It was an old wooden bedroom. I was seemingly lying on a bed or in one side of the room, and I could see in the right-hand corner of the room, the very right-hand corner, there was a wooden door. There was blue curtains, and at that point, I heard the door open because it creaked, the wood creaked. I saw the curtains move because of the draft, and then I heard the voice of a young girl say, "Here he is." At that point, the wife woke up and said I was absolutely screaming in hysterics,
wow.
as if I was being attacked. But when I looked across at her, she was in the same vein. She was the one in hysterics, and basically we were slightly different times, but in the same incident, we were basically looking at each other in hysterics as if we were being attacked. Now, obviously, after this had happened, we both got up. We couldn't go back to sleep. We waited. Family got up, and when we told them, we then, probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, we both went outside to go and collect the medium in the car. Literally, as I walked on the driveway to get in the car, there was a phone call from her saying, "Sorry, I can't help you." So I called her straight back and said, with all due respect, you are going to help us because something really bad happened last night. So we carried on. She agreed. We carried on. When we got to her house, she was nervously pacing around on her doorstep. The door behind her was closed. And it had transpired that on the morning, a washing machine had lifted up off the ground. It wasn't even switched on. And she put a coffee cup in the kitchen. And when she came to retrieve it minutes later to be moved and put on the windowsill of her living room, something was trying to stop her from coming to help us.
Wow.
She came over to the house, and again, to cut a very, very extremely long story short, she repeated this girl's story to us in our living room. And what she said is this girl, she actually gave us the date of 1850. Now, the reason that we smelled flowers is because it was the 9th of February was the anniversary of the incident, but it was in 1850.
Right.
So it had actually been 59 years previous. And what she said was, this girl had been abused by her stepfather. She also gave his name. And on this particular occasion, which was about 3:30 in the morning on the 9th of February, 159 years earlier, he'd come into the bedroom, as I'd seen, and he basically accidentally smothered her, and she died. What we also didn't realise until that particular point is that we also had the spirit of her assailant with us as well. And he was the one that had been smashing windows and doing all kinds of things in the house. So, again, to cut a long story short, she managed to get this girl to wherever she was meant to be. And in relation to him, he put up such a fight that she had to get help from the other side, and it actually made her ill for 6 months.
Right.
Because he was that powerful and he was that strong.
Yeah.
As the girl was leaving, she said to us, "Thank you, I'm sorry, and my favourite colours are pink and lilac," which was seemingly a strange thing to say. However, a couple of days later, we came back from a day out, and when we walked into our house, there was a pink and lilac flower waiting for us. So we had basically been taken back in time to either observe or experience or do something at the last moments of this girl's life.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And that really, so really for me, that is the one sort of pinnacle point that I would cite as being what you would class as some kind of awakening.
Yes.
Because from that point on,
it seemed like that from the introduction I've seen from you. Well, when you say he accidentally asphyxiated her, what brings you to that conclusion? Do you not think he was on purpose, or?
Well, the information that was passed is that he used to abuse her.
Right.
And on this particular
I
occasion,
see. He's just trying to keep her quiet, sort of thing.
he was trying to keep her quiet, and she, as a result of that, he's put his hand over her mouth and nose,
maybe for too long,
and she died. So, so the information that came to us was that it was more that scenario than a deliberate thing to do.
Yeah, not like a murder, more like a manslaughter type of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very sad, though, isn't it? It's
It's extremely sad. But, it had happened, and it became a part of our life as well.
Oh, that's quite fascinating, that story. Yeah, I know it's. Is that actually featured in one of your books, or is it?
It's the ebook called When Murder Travels Through Time.
Oh, right, I've seen that. I haven't actually got that book. I've got a couple of your books, but I haven't actually got that one. But yeah, I'll have to get hold of that. That sounds interesting. Now, really, your research goes into like advanced science and sound geometrics and the knowledge which is encrypted within monuments, ancient monuments, etc., isn't it? Even religious buildings and scriptures, etc.
It certainly does. Again, 2009 being an extremely pinnacle year. I was kept seeing a golden key being given to me in my mind's eye, and I couldn't understand what a gold key was until I, some time later I looked into it and what it really means. And when you go to church, you can see sometimes on the stained glass window somebody being handed a golden key.
Yes,
it's really it's the Gnostic worthiness of sacred knowledge. So it's basically symbolic of coming into sacred knowledge. And that really was given to me in 2009. So from that point, alongside, with a happy marriage of lots of different paranormal things, seeing wormholes and UFOs coming out of them and dimensional gateways opening in front of me and things like that, the happy marriage of being given lots and lots of sacred information. I can actually be sitting at home even now and actually pinpoint the exact moment that information is being put into my head. Now, what that information is really is code-breaking information that has enabled me to create a blueprint that spans the whole of the ancient world. But the whole of the ancient world also spans into the world religions, because it's all the same message, it's all part of the same blueprint. And that blueprint is really something that goes deep and is not being taught in any public levels of any religion or any public levels of history. So it's enabled me to, again, with 17 years of evidence gathering, that sort of put me in good stead to now code break all of these ancient codes. And what I found really, yes, sound is extremely important. When you look at the likes of Stonehenge, it is really a gigantic tuning fork. It's a phonetic profiler that is capable of deciphering hidden messages within sound waves. So in other words, Stonehenge is really a massive receptor, receiver, transmitter, where the wise ones, the in-tune ones, are able to receive languages from other places in the form of sound, and they're able to scribe and decipher a language. And when you start looking at mathematics and numbers, there is mathematical proof of a correlation between Stonehenge and planet Mars, and the moon, between the Great Pyramid and the planet Mars, the Sidonian city. So there's this grander thing that's going on. But the ancient code basically is that all of these monuments, these ancient monuments, are all connected as a computer, and they are harnessing the Earth's energy lines, and they are basically massive amplifications, but not only amplifications of sound, but they're all also amplifications of the inner vessel, the inner portal, which is the pineal gland. And when you look at the likes of the Great Pyramid, is what people don't realise is when you put an overlay of the human head over the Great Pyramid, it actually marks the exact location of the three master glands of the third eye system, which is your inner portal. So, for argument's sake, where you have the king's chamber, you have the pineal gland. Where you have the pituitary gland, you have the queen's chamber, and so on. And when you get the subterranean chambers, and even now, Egyptologists and scholars are scratching their head as to what the subterranean chambers of the Great Pyramid mean. What it means, it represents the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind feeds the conscious mind. It's really a giant replica of the human brain, the inner portal, as well as a gigantic resonance chamber to transcend to other places. Wow. So I found all this magnificent blueprints. When you start looking at the likes of the Heads of Easter Island, which again They have mathematical code encrypted within them. They have spiritual code encrypted within them. They are basically a crystalline aerial to other places. And when you look at the main pyramids in Tikal comes from Tika, which means the third eye. When you look at the word Vatican, it comes from Vatika. Tika is the third eye. They're talking about this inner portal, which is the pineal gland. And that is why at the Vatican City, you'll see lots of statues of pine cones, because pine cone gives us the word pineal.
Yeah, you do see those a lot in a lot of buildings, don't you? Pine cones, yeah.
You do, but that really is symbolic of our inner portal, which is our pineal gland. And it goes a lot deeper than that. It goes more expansive than that. But in a nutshell, all of these ancient monuments, whether they're monoliths, whether they're pyramids, whether they're gigantic heads, whether they are the Nazca lines, whether they are white horses on hills as pictorials, whether they are the spirals of crop circles, they are all hidden messages. They are all sort of hidden frequencies that are able to be deciphered by the people who are tuned in.
Do you think there's some sort of secret, I don't know if it's not a secret society, but a secret collection of people who know all these secrets, and because I've heard that we've lost a lot of knowledge over the centuries, and it's been blocked off to us. I don't know if you have that opinion of that, or if you agree with that.
Absolutely. When you look at beautiful geometry on churches and Islamic buildings and all, geometry was put there because of its sonic resonance. The sonic resonance, especially when you start introducing sound, hymns, sung, it actually resonates to the point of sacredness. Now, what happens is with geometry is, if you imagine the principle of creation is geometry, and all geometric shapes are determined by a circle. Now, basically every known life form begins as a sphere, which is a circle. So if you imagine the universal consciousness is a dot, if you then imagine a circle around the dot, which then becomes the monad, is universal consciousness. If you imagine a dot that moves, then becomes a line, and a line is a radius, and a radius comes from radios, which means sun god. It is the Christ intellect. It is the connection of the Christ to the infinite. Then, when you start looking at how this sacred geometry was once taught as part of initial early Christianity, but it was then blocked as heresy.
Yeah.
Because the priesthoods of the time actually wanted this sacred information to be retained by them, by the chosen ones, by the initiates. And this obviously goes back even further into the likes of the mystery schools of Egypt, where you had the priesthoods, the priestesses, you had the pharaohs. Pharaoh means great mind. You know, we have the likes of the gods Teote, which is really the master of thought. Teote is thought. They wanted to keep all of this sacred information to the secret brotherhoods. Now that information comes all the way through into the modern day, in the likes of the high degrees of Masonry, in the Kabbalah, in the Sufism of Islam, in the Mithraism of Christianity. When you start looking at company logos, when you start looking at vehicle badges and logos, they are all containing this sacred message within sacred geometry. And it goes all the way from the ancient past all the way through to the modern day, but it is a hidden secret because it is for the Hierophants, it is for the Hermetics. Now those words simply mean those who are able to understand the sacred mysteries, and metaphors and symbols began to be used as a way of communication between the initiates, in which they were able to decipher and interpret sacred information through geometry, through shapes, through metaphors, through symbols. And so, yes, it's a deliberate ploy to keep this sacred information away from the public. Yeah. And they know full well that the further away from self that people go, the more their consciousness diminishes. The closer to self that they get, the more their consciousness raises. And that is why they created this false reality of false icons, in order to keep people outside of themselves. Because that way, their consciousness will always remain at a low ebb, at a low level, and they will never ever see or understand that there's this secret language going on. So in a nutshell, yes, it has been deliberately kept from us.
Yeah. I mean, did you discover that when you were actually in the police force? Because as I understand it, the police force, even as the police force insignias, like with the star shapes, are something to do with the sun gods from ancient past. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly started to wake up and start seeing a wider reality before I left. When you start looking again, masonry, and it's not all bad, you know, it's basically, yes, a society with secrets, you know, but when you start looking at the police insignia, you know, you have the 7-pointed star, which is the symbol of the Kabbalah. When you start looking at the crown, you know, you have the Bina understanding, you have the crown of the superintendent, you have the double chevron of the sergeant, you know, you have the Masonic black and white, but again, you know, which is all to do with duality, which is all to do with the balancing of opposites. But when you turn those black and white squares round, you then start getting a double squared diagonal, which then starts becoming secret information of how to commune with the higher consciousness. So that, yes, I began to have a realization. But obviously that realization is more now than it was then. But there were snippets and fragments of this awakening before I left the service.
Yeah, because it leads you to I mean, if that is all true, it leads you to the fact that the police force are being controlled by a mysterious force outside of, you know, which is actually looking after the people that think themselves more important than what the normal people are. Is the way I think of it, like that.
Well, it is. Well, again, when you start looking at the insignia of the police force, which again is the Kabbalah, which is mystical Judaism, when you start looking at who, you know, creates laws, now laws is really that the god of law is Saturn, and that is why the police wear black, because the colour associated with Saturn is black. Now, when you start looking at the god of law and the police and the Kabbalah, when you start looking at legalities, when people sign a contract, Saturn has magnetic energy which contracts. So we then start to see that the whole of this legal system, this whole banking system, this whole reality of what we live in is actually controlled by the same few people. Yeah. And when you start realising that, you do realise that, yes, everything in society, everything of significance and importance is controlled at a point of origin.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we hear about the top of the pyramid. Now, what that top of the pyramid is I've heard it be described as like reptilian aliens. I mean, what's your opinion of that? I couldn't believe it if you'd have asked me a few years ago about reptilians, I'd have said I was a lot of rubbish. But I've heard so much over the last few years about reptilians and from different people, from different walks of life. And to me, there's something in it, you know. Don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I've seen an ET, not a reptilian, but they do exist. There are many races of extraterrestrials that do have different appearances. Draconians, reptilians, whatever you want to call them, they do exist.
I think it's just our description of them, isn't it? Because they look reptilian. It's, you know.
Absolutely, and you know, of course, we have the R complex of the brain, which is the reptilian brain and things. But yes, there are several races that are closely interlinked with earthly society and always have been. Now, as I say, I've stood next to one. I've stood next to somebody who was 6'3", black eyes, energy filled, made me sort of spin. Skin completely taut over the contours of the bones of his face. He was not from here. Now, there are many races that are walking amongst us, and of course, you know, why wouldn't there be? You know, the universe is full of life. It's not empty. It's not empty space. It's full. So yes, they do exist. But when I start looking at the things like the Sumerian scrolls and the Zechariah Sitchin translation of them, I see a completely different translation, which is one of a metaphor for geometric creation. And when you start looking at the names of the characters of these Sumerian scrolls, you then start to realise that is actually true. Their chief god is called Anu. Now, when you start looking into one of the oldest languages of Earth, which is Sanskrit, Anu means atom. When you start looking at the Sheti, the snake brothers, which is Enki and Enlil, that becomes the double helix of DNA. When you start looking at Alalu means wave genetics. So it's a waveform that creates DNA. So we have Adam and Tiamat, which is basically Adam and Eve in Eridu, which is Eden. Now Eden is the body, and of course they all lived in the east of Eden. Now the east of Eden is the right brain, which is the connector to the higher forces. So when you start analysing this secret indoctrination within these Sumerian scrolls, you start looking at the Watchers, and the Watcher means he who is awake. He's talking about consciousness. He's talking about the fertility event, this ambag that seems to be carried around on a lot of ancient depictions, including Well, people don't know what that means, but what that is, it's a genetic message, because when you look at the handle of the handbag, the handle of the handbag is an arch which is 180 degrees. 180 degrees is the perfect bonding angle for hydrogen bonding, which then takes you back to the DNA double helix of Enki and Enlil. When you look at the actual square of the handbag, you see the Punnett square, which is really telling us that germates, which are germs, how they connect to germs of the opposite sex to create the fertility event, the fertilization event. Then you start looking at how they tell you that Enki is associated with semen and fertility, and you then look at where the Sumerian scrolls didn't actually say that Planet X was the home of the Anunnaki. It was actually Dooku. Dooku means the mound of Venus. It is the Mons Verinis, which is the pubic bone. So we're then going straight back to fertility. When you start looking at what Nibiru is given the name of Planet X, Nibiru, which means wandering planet, is what the Egyptians called Neb-Heru, which is the planet Venus. Again, it's associated with semen and fertility, because in Sanskrit, again, the word for Venus is Shukra, which means seminal secretion. It's really talking about genetics and the fertilization event of humanity. It's nothing to do with what Zachariah Sitchin has actually translated.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because you do see that, well, for want of a better word, handbag, in different, quite across the world, don't you, in different religions. It's, it's weird.
You do?
Yeah.
You do. You also see the Egyptians carrying what is known as the Ankh, which is that, obviously, the key of life is what it's known as, but the Ankh, not only is it an energy director, again, talking about, the phonetic profile of Stonehenge, but it's also what is basically DNA duplication. So when a protein sees the DNA cell, it will wrap itself over the top and then tie itself at the ends. It's really duplication of cells, and these energy directors are able to change the molecular level of DNA. So it's really telling us about the key of life, which is the duplication of cells. When you look into the Bible and you start looking at the book of Genesis, the book of Genesis is really the book of genetics, the book of genes. Right, yeah, because then you go into Adam and Eve, which is the atom, and the electron, which is extracted from the atom as part of nuclear fission, which becomes the Eve, the atom, and the Eve. When you look at Noah comes from two Hebrew words, nunchet, which means life in the waters. It's talking about the child in its mother, which is the arc, which is the arc length, which is the sphere, and that sphere, as I said earlier, is the origin of all known life forms. So the story of Noah is talking about the creation of a child, the fertility event. So is Jesus Christ. So is Mary Magdalene. So are all of these biblical characters. They are not what they are taught to be.
No. In fact, they go back much further than the Bible, don't they? Into the ancient Indian, the Mahabharata, and also the Quran, isn't it? It's these characters, I believe, have come from those originally, as I understand it.
Well, again, when you look at different civilizations, you can see that the story of Jesus has happened at least 15 times previous.
Yes, so that's kind of what I mean. It's
yeah. So but Jesus, again, all of these biblical characters are really a fiction to conceal fact. They are metaphors for ourself. Now, when you look at the word deity, it comes from deit, which means self. What they're actually hiding from us is our own sanctity, our own potential, our own. We are all Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is really talking about the solar force within us, the dragon rider, the master of the dragon, which is the master of wisdom, which is the Christ force within us, and that is activated by certain practices, by certain spiritual practices that activate this Christ seed, the energy of which is then stored in the solar plexus, which is known as Bethlehem. Inside the solar plexus, you have a thimble-sized depression known as the manger. So we have this Christ force that is birthed in a manger in Bethlehem. And according to the Gnostics and whatever, a virgin is basically someone who knows how to use sexual energy. And that then gets us into sexual sublimation. It then gets us into celibacy. It then gets us into resurrection, which means to use again. So you can see that this story of Jesus, who was then crucified on the cross, which is the optic chasers that move inside the brain. You can see that all of this then starts to develop into a metaphor for our own inner sanctity and our own inner portal, our own inner potential.
Do you receive much criticism for that point of view? Because I mean, I know it's actually quite out there. It's not all your research, is it? Because I've heard it from different points of view too, but which agree with your research too. Do you get much abuse because of that? Because I know that when you get someone who's very religious, they don't seem to be able to see past what they're reading in the Bible, and what are your views on that, Mike? It's
Well, I do. I mean, when I talk about this, and again, people can only see things from their level of perception. Now, when people are brought up into a certain religion and their mind is completely rented out, and they actually can't see, they don't look for the truth because they're told they've found it, because but when you actually start looking at the likes of Catholic popes like Pope Leo X that have publicly said in the past, it has served as well, this myth of Christ. When in 2017 you have the current Pope Francis, at a Catholic Mass saying that Jesus is metaphorical, not literal. Now, the people at the top of these religions know full well the truth of these characters, but unfortunately humanity is such that it has to have some kind of icon to follow. It has to be, I don't like using the word sheep, but they are sheep that must follow a shepherd. Yeah. And
well, I mean, they're described as sheep in the Bible anyway, aren't they? So
exactly. Well, they are the flock who follows the shepherd. But what they don't tell you is the good shepherd is really the enlightened being who understands this true nature. Now, when you actually criticise that shepherd to the flock, of course there's going to be a bad reaction. When I go into the UFO community and start saying to you what Zachariah Sitchin has said about the Anunnaki is not entirely as it is, it gets the same reaction. Because I've got the benefit of seeing the whole of the ancient world. Now, when you find a blueprint, it's the same as in the universe. When you understand that within the universe, everything, without exception, follows a mathematical sequence. It follows a mathematical code that has been pre-programmed. So therefore, the Earth is not flat, because the whole principle of creation is one of spherical geometry. So therefore, one planet out of a billion being flat is not possible, because it goes against the blueprint and common sense. Now, when you look at a blueprint, when you look at the evidence of that blueprint, when you go to a crime scene, it speaks to you. It doesn't matter what people on the side of the road are telling you happened. If the evidence tells you something else, then those people at the side of the road are not telling you the truth. And that is what I'm finding. And this blueprint it's not just one small aspect. It's not just one monolith in the middle of Wiltshire. It is the whole of the ancient world that are telling you the same thing. Now, when the same words keep popping up, when the same numbers keep popping up repeatedly, time after time after time, that is something to be paid attention to, because there is evidence there, there's a message in there, and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. They're all telling us that they're all singing from the same database of knowledge, because they're all leaving the same message, they're all leaving the same codes, and they're all leaving the same information about self and the universe and how we play a part in that, in their structures, in their monuments, in biblical structure, in Islamic structure, in the Torah, in Hinduism, in Sikhism, in Islam. All of these, when you start looking beyond the public levels of these belief systems, you then begin to see the truth. And the truth is what's being taught on your Sunday service. That is a fiction that is concealing fact.
Yeah, they'll kind of, yeah, I agree with you completely, actually. When you go to, it's like fairy stories, isn't it? You're really just, I really don't want to insult anybody, because I'm sure you must get quite a lot of feedback against your theories with some people, but I mean,
yeah, of course. I mean, I was at an event the other week, and somebody came over and started talking about what I write about and what I say, and they were a Christian, and I started to speak to them, and they said, "Okay, so everybody's been brought up on a lie except for you." And I said, "No, I was brought up on the same lie, but I've seen through it." And I said, "I'm not the only one that's seen through it. There's lots of people seeing through it, and when you do see through it, it then starts to make sense."
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You have to, because it's not all entirely. That's what I was saying. It's not all entirely your theory. I've actually heard it. I mean, obviously we all learn from each other, don't we? And you've obviously learnt from other people with that theory and built upon it. You know, I mean, when we look at things like in a new country like the US, when in Washington they've got the great big what do you call it? The big pointed monument. Yeah. Well, like our Cleopatra's Needle, it's exactly as I believe there's some sort of resonance with what you're talking about with that, isn't there?
Well, there is for one, it's a tuning fork, and for two, in Egyptian mythology, it's the penis of Osiris. Now, Osiris is basically the pineal gland, but Osiris is connected with the constellation of Orion. You then have the dome of Washington DC, which is connected with Isis, which is the womb. You then have the oval office. The oval is connected to the womb and also the pituitary gland in the brain. You have the symbol for Sirius, which is the dome, the star, and the obelisk. You have so much worship of Isis, the goddess Isis, within American culture, within Washington DC, within London, within Parliament. It's basically it all comes from ancient Egypt. When we look at the likes of the red carpet at Oscar ceremonies, that is really symbolic of a royal bloodline that goes back to the pharaohs of Egypt. So you will find that the majority of the US presidents, British royalty, European royalty, are connected to the pharaohs of Egypt. Even David Cameron, the former British Prime Minister, is related to the Queen. He's the cousin of Boris Johnson. You know, he's the cousin of Harriet Harman, who was temporary leader of the opposition. You will start to see genetically that the people who are put in power, who are ruling over us, are really part of the same genetic line. And you see all this symbolisation in, as I say, in Washington, in Paris, the Statue of Liberty. You've got all of London. You've got the River Thames, which is Tamus, the dark river, which is the Palkus, who's the serpent of darkness, which then leads you to dark evil, which then leads you to the devil, which is ignorance. You have all of these things going back to the same place in ancient history. So, you know, the president, the Congress, even the signing of the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July that was signed in Philadelphia. Feeley is the temple of Isis in Egypt. Delpha is Delphos, the womb. He's the goddess of the womb, the goddess of motherhood. It all goes back to Egypt. So, again, it's all part of the blueprint that has been found, that you see these ancient belief systems, these ancient sacred information that was for the privileged few, still today are hidden within monuments, within buildings, within even the governments of the land. When you look at the word America, it comes from Amaraku, which basically means the land of the feathered serpents. That then takes you to Quetzalcoatl, which is really talking about Kundalini energy, which is the serpent fire at the base of the spine that is activated by certain practices. It all leads to the same point of origin. If you imagine a tree, the bark of the tree is true Gnosticism. It is the truth. It is the origin of everything. But the branches have been deliberately put there as a means of keeping people away from that bark. That is really what is happening in people's reality field. And many of them cannot see past the individual twig or the individual branch or the individual leaf that their reality rests upon.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. I hope everyone's taking note out there, because I'm going to be asking questions afterwards. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, Michael. I don't really know where to go next with it. What about Atlantis? Do you think there's any sort of connections with the old legends of Atlantis with the ancients, or do you think that was kind of a story that was, you know, manufactured by somebody?
Again, Atlantis and Lemuria are part of the blueprint that I found as part of history. Now, when I again just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to a friend and his wife, and they were talking. They're very spiritual, and they were talking about the reactivation of the Atlantean and Lemurian crystals. So what's the real meaning of that? When you look at the likes of Plato, who and many of these Greek philosophers like Socrates and all that actually had their education in the mystery schools of Egypt. They then took that to Greece. You see that the Kabbalah had their education in the mystery schools of Egypt and took it into Judaism. So what does it mean? When you look at Plato, he said that Atlantis is the island that rules 7. So when we look at the human spine, which is the biblical Jacob's ladder that takes you from earth to heaven. Now, the lower chakras of the body are known as the kingdom of earth. The upper chakras are known as the kingdom of heaven. So when you climb up Jacob's ladder, you come to heaven. The human spine has 33 vertebrae. When you get to the 33rd vertebrae, it is known medically as Atlas. Now, Atlantis means the island of Atlas. What it's really telling you, when you see the legend of Atlas holding up the world, it is really holding up the mind. It is holding up the consciousness which exists within Golgotha, the place of skulls. Now, the pineal gland is the master gland of the chakra system. It is that inner portal that I spoke about in the ancient cultures. So that master gland is situated in the geometric centre of the human brain. It is between the two hemispheres, and it is surrounded by the cerebrospinal fluid. Therefore, that master gland is an island. It is the island that rules 7. It is the master gland that rules over the 7 chakras. So Atlantis is talking about consciousness. It is, and the re-emergence, the reactivation of Atlantean and Lemurian crystal is the area of the brain between the pituitary gland and the pineal gland is known as the Crystal Palace. You may recognise that from a certain football team name, but it is known as the Crystal Palace. That is the reactivation of the Atlantean and the Lemurian crystals. So we have Atlantis, which is the pineal gland, which is Osiris, the king's chamber in Egypt, and we have Lemuria, which is Queen Mu, who is basically a Mayan queen, who is the equivalent of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Isis is the pituitary gland. So there we have Atlantis, the pineal gland, Lemuria, pituitary gland. It is the masculine and the feminine counterparts. Now, the only way that we can reach the Egyptian, what the Egyptians called their god state, their godhead, is by the balance and the union of polarities, the union and the balance of opposites, which is masculine and feminine as aspects of duality. When you see the likes of Egyptian mummies, who incidentally face the east, because the east in cardinal points is the direction of enlightenment, illumination, you will see that their arms are crossed over their chest in a cross formation. That cross formation is symbolic of the union of opposites, and that cross happens at a central point at the top of the heart. It's really the union of opposites. When you see the mask of King Tutankhamun, the gold is really the philosopher's stone. It is the internal alchemy. Now, alchemy comes from chem, which is the former name of Egypt, where we get chemistry, alchemy, chemicals, chemistry. It comes from chem, Egypt. Now, when you look at the King Tutankhamun's mask, and you see the 2 serpents over the 3rd eye, that is the sacred rivers of the Ida and the Pingala nerves. And when they meet at the 3rd eye, the 6th chakra, they create, certainly when they're balanced, it's the negative and the positive serpent. When they are balanced, they create what is known as a consciousness fusion, and that is really what it's indicating. When you start looking at what looks like the cobra headdress, is really the cerebellum, which is the little brain, which deals with equilibrium, which deals with balance. When you start looking at what people believe is a beard on these statues, it's not. It's what is known as the vermis, which means serpent, because the serpent, the vermis, separates the 2 lateral hemispheres, the 2 wings of the cerebellum. It's all to do with equilibrium, all to do with balance, the balancing of opposites which took them to their God state. It is the balancing of their vessel. So Atlantis and Lemuria are really a metaphor for our own inner consciousness.
Oh yeah, that is fascinating. That's I mean, I'm a great fan of Ancient Aliens. I don't know if you are, but in your opinion, do you think aliens built the pyramids, or do you think, or they gave the technology to the ancients in order to build the pyramids? I still can't think that it was just done by human hands myself, but.
Yeah, my theory is they were used by humans, but they were taught by people not of this world. When you look at Egyptian documents, they tell you that they were visited by people from the stars, and how they were given certain mathematical equations and certain information. So, but there is no record of the Egyptians ever building the pyramids. Now, when you start looking at all of these fantastic sites, I believe they were put there by people who are of a greater, or certainly of a greater knowledge base than people are. But I do think there were certain individuals within the higher society that were taught how to use these pieces of equipment. Yeah. And when you start looking at, the famous face on Mars, which in the Zachariah Sitchin story is the face of Alalu. It isn't, because as I said, Alalu is way of genetics. But when you do actually look at how the Sidonian city on Mars has actually been geographically mapped by Richard G. Hoagland, and you can see that there's the likes of five-sided pyramids. Now, the number 5 is all to do with realised man, total knowing, again, consciousness, the pentagram, the fifth element. But when you start looking at the face on Mars, and you start looking at the longitude and latitude grid vectors, it has encrypted a satellite navigation location of Stonehenge. When you look at Stonehenge and you look at the diameters and the mathematics within the diameters of Stonehenge, it tells you how to find the Sidonian city on planet Mars. When you look at the Great Pyramid of Egypt and you start doubling pi, which again is a mathematical frequency, but a double pi by the diameters of the pyramid, again it has encrypted the location of the Sidonian city on Mars. When you look at Phobos, which is the moon of Mars, it has obelisks. When you look at the moon, it has a lunar abaca, which are a set of 6 obelisks that are mapped out to the diameters of the 3 main pyramids of Giza. That is clearly, when you start looking at Avebury in Wiltshire, it is an exact map overlay of the Sidonian city on Mars. When you look at Silbury Hill, which is the largest mound in Europe, it is an exact match of a mound that is on the Sidonian city on Mars. We have a Mars henge on Mars. We have all of these correlations between the planets, where the likes of the Great Pyramids, the likes of Stonehenge, the likes of other pyramids were creating a portal in order to transmit. So for anyone who's seen Star Trek and beam me up, Scotty, this was really happening, and it was really happening with other planets. And there's mathematical proof, and there's monuments up there that have proved it's either a civilization that has come from these planets, or it's a civilization that is able to travel between them. Now that to me would suggest the ancient alien theory. Now, having seen an absolute plethora of UFOs of all shapes and sizes, both day and night, of all kinds of distance and all kinds of heights, some of them literally 500 feet above me, having seen them coming out of dimensional portals, having been telepathically invited to certain locations, there is something clearly going on that we are not being told about. And why would humans be the only life form or the only existence in a universe that is absolutely teemed with life?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
It makes no sense.
No. Especially when you talk about the interdimensional aspects of it. I mean, this is why I called this show Paranormal Dimensions, because there are so many dimensions to life, I believe myself, that it's not just all extraterrestrial stuff. I think probably most of what we see is interdimensional, or see or experience.
Well, the extraterrestrial subject is just one of many. I mean, obviously, it comes and goes, and it's in the news, and lots of people are seeing more and more things now. So there's obviously been some kind of enhancement of a visual sort of display, but it's just one part of many things. If you imagine a massive stately home, it doesn't just have one room; it has hundreds of rooms. And whether you look at electromagnetic forces that some people call angels, whether you look at extraterrestrials, which are basically humanoids that are aligned to a different star system, we are aligned to this solar system, this star system. And some of them are aligned to Sirius, some of them are aligned to Orion, some of them are aligned to Arcturus, Alpha Centauri. When you start looking at how a lot of these ancient monuments are in alignment with the constellation of Orion and the three belts, the three stars of the belt of Orion, you will see that the Orion nursery, the M42, is really the birthplace of matter for this side of the universe, for Earth. So they're basically telling us of our origins, which is really in Orion, is really in the stars. And when a star goes supernova, it creates gold. When a star explodes and dies, it creates carbon, it creates oxygen, which then creates life. So really, we are all particles of dead exploded stars. Now, when we have a child, we call it a youngster, which is really saying a young star, because we are all the material of the stars. So in effect, we are all star people. Now, if a dead star is continuing to live within us, when our physicality dies, we will continue to live in something else, and that is how we become eternal in terms of these particles of matter.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about that. The youngster, yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Right, I think I'll tell you what, Michael. I mean, if you're up for it, I'd really like to continue with this. Maybe do a part 2. Would you be up for that?
I certainly would. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it.
I think we've got so much that, you've got so much that we probably haven't had time to cover here, because I think we're just about coming up to the end of this show anyway. But I think I'd like to do a part 2 with you if you're up for it, and that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, for the next show I'll do that then. This is going to be the first 2-parter. But anyway, thanks ever so much. I'm
privileged.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Michael. And as I say, we'll continue this, and there'll be a part 2 coming up, people out there. And I hope you've been as intrigued as I have been. And I want to say thank you again for Michael, and you'll be hearing again next week from him. So I'm going to say bye everyone now, and hope you'll tune in again for part 2. Thank you. Bye. Well, here we are again, and as I said last week, we've got I'm going to go into a 2-parter this week. We've got Michael Feeley back again, because it was so fascinating last week, and I think it was just being a bit unfair to Michael to cut into 2 actually. I just had 1 part, because I think there's so many more, so much more to his story and his research. So I think I'll introduce Michael Feeley back again, and hopefully he'll be able to continue from where he left off. Hello, Michael.
Hello again, David. Thanks for inviting me back.
No, it's a great pleasure. I've been absolutely fascinated. It's given me a lot more. I need to be doing a lot more reading about this stuff, because it's actually blowing my mind quite a bit.
Well, that's good. It's obviously working.
I think we were talking about ley lines and things like last week, and how one thing leads into another, and it was just fascinating to me. If you can remember whereabouts we were up to, I'll leave it to you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I was just saying that because I found a blueprint that I call an ancient code, and because I found that blueprint in all of the ancient past. And I just mentioned whether it's the pyramids of Egypt, the pyramids of the Mayans, the Quetzalcoatl of South America, whether it's in public buildings, whether it's in government buildings, whether it's in the Bible or Islam or all of these holy books, whether it's in circular monoliths in Wiltshire, whether it's monoliths around the world, whether it's myth and legends such as Atlantis and Lemuria, whether it's cuneiform scrolls such as the Sumerian scrolls. There is a message that has been encrypted, that has been left for humanity to find. And I think that message is given to us by higher than human consciousness. And when you start looking at how fascinating and how well encrypted and how brilliantly it's been encrypted, but how it was used to amplify, enhance, how Stonehenge was used as a sort of a phonetic profiler, which is basically capable of deciphering messages within sound waves. Now, what they were doing, if everyone understands about the World War II Enigma code-breaking machine, you will understand that you are able to extract words and letters from sound through the likes of radio waves. Now, a normal radio wave is a singular sine wave. If you wish to encode messages inside that, you create two radio waves together. That then encrypts a message. And if you want that message to be of a higher octave, of a higher frequency, those two waves are put very, very close together. Now, when you look at the likes of the great composers such as Bach and Mozart, Bach in particular used to put coded messages in his symphonies, and he actually used to communicate with his wife and members of the family by encoding messages within the sounds of his symphonies.
Really?
So when you start looking at the likes of Stonehenge, which is really a gigantic tuning fork, and you start being able to scribe and transcribe and extract these words and letters out of sound, you can then start to communicate through radio waves. When you then start to realise that sound and light are intertwined and that both actually contain messages, for argument's sake, the photons of the sun contain genetic information that communicates with human DNA. When you start looking at the root word of sun, which is sonic, so then we start to look at light and sound, and that is why, the sun is so important to, the likes of Stonehenge that marked the spot where the sun would rise, and all of these planetary alignments and planetary things that are going on around the world. When you start looking at Silbury Hill, it represents Earth and Mars, which is why there is so much connection between the planet Mars, Silbury Hill, around Stonehenge, around Avebury. Stonehenge represents the planet Saturn. Planet Saturn has a hexagon on its north pole. The hexagon is the symbol of wisdom, symbol of enlightenment. So we have all of these mysterious things going on in the ancient world. And when you start being able to put all these pieces together, if you imagine, the detective movies where they're piecing all this together on this massive mosaic, you then start to see a pattern emerging. And as I was saying last week, when the same metaphors keep repeating, when the same words keep repeating, when the same number sequences keep repeating in all of these ancient cultures that we are told are completely individual with no connection to each other, you begin to see that that's a complete fallacy, and how these ancient cultures all had access to the same knowledge base. Now, if they all have access to the same knowledge base, they must have had some kind of connection, or they must have had some point of contact that was making them all connect with the same database of information, because it is really all about the sanctity of self and how we can raise ourselves to what the Egyptians called the God state, to what esoteric Christianity is really the Christ consciousness. Now, Christ consciousness vibrates at 33 hertz, which is why the Bible tells us Christ died aged 33. We have 33 degrees of masonry, that the word Amen correlates to the number 33. We have 33 spins of DNA to complete a sequence of DNA. We even have NASA's launch pad with its X-33. You have the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, 111111 is 33. Number 33 is a master number of power. So we have all of this numerology as well. Christ was baptized at age 30, because in numerology, the number 30 connects you to a higher place. It's that superior connection. When you see all these references to the number 40 in the Bible, Jesus in the wilderness, Moses in the wilderness, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. the number 40 has the power to lift
the
you to
feeding
a
of the
spiritual.
40,000 as well, wasn't it?
Yes. So again, it's all encoded messages. So the number 40 has the power to lift you to the spiritual state. It has the power to lift you to Moses. Now, Moses is a metaphor for the illuminated mind. Now, when Moses goes to the top of the mountain, a mountain is a metaphor for a higher consciousness. So when Moses is at the top of the mountain and he comes across the burning bush is the pineal gland that is activated by the fire of Kundalini energy. It is the awakened mind. It is the illuminated mind. That is the Moses. And we have, when you start to analyze the Moses story, it all points to the same thing. You know, where the plagues of Egypt, where there was an argument with the Pharaoh. Now, the Pharaoh is really a metaphor for ego. So we will have this battle. The illuminated mind will have this battle with the ego. But once the illuminated mind wins, that mind has been activated by what it says in the biblical story. The captors of Israel that were kept hostage in Egypt, which is really in the Kabbalah, it is the abyss, it is the lower chakras. Egypt is the lower chakras. Moses released them by the raising of the brazen serpent. That is the activation of the Kundalini serpent energy of fire, which then goes from the lower chakras, and by its fire, it destroys them. That is the burning of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah are metaphors for the lower chakras. When we start looking at alchemy, and you start looking at the Bible, and you start looking at how Lot's wife turned into salt, when the body goes through what is known as alchemical ascension, the only thing that is left of the physical body is salt. That is telling you that it's going from the base level of metals up to the philosopher's stone, which is the gold of the crown chakra of enlightenment. That is why Lot's wife turned to salt. It's talking about alchemical ascension. So when you have this overall picture, you then start to see, and you are able to then piece all this together to make one big picture. But that one big picture is all of the same landscape, and that landscape is really enlightenment and consciousness, and how certain factors are able to raise that within us.
Yeah. When you see a picture of the Eye of Horus, isn't that the same thing as the pineal gland? It seems to me when you see a picture side by side with it.
Yeah, yes, it is. The pineal gland, the Eye of Horus is the pineal gland.
I mean,
yes.
How would they have that knowledge back then if it wasn't actually that? You know what I mean? Because they wouldn't have had any idea of what it was, would they? You know, that's
well. Remarkably, they did, because they understood the brain. You know, when you look at the crown of the Teth, it is really the brain opened out. The two hemispheres of the brain are opened out. When as I was saying last week, when you look at the Great Pyramid and you put an overlay of the human head facing north, because the pineal gland is the north gate. Now, when you put an overlay of the human head, you will see that it replicates and matches exactly where the three master glands of the third eye system are. Now, the third eye is known as the endocrine system. Endocrine means secretion within. That secretion is white and brown, and that is why we have in the Bible the land of milk and honey. It's all relating to that consciousness wave, that consciousness awakening. So the Egyptians had an extremely advanced knowledge of DNA. They had an advanced knowledge of the brain. They had advanced knowledge of anatomy. They had advanced knowledge of how the brain connects to the universe. They had an advanced knowledge of star systems. They had an advanced knowledge of subatomic particles. But then again, so did the writers of the Bible, who were the likes of the Pharisees, who had connections to the Kabbalah, who had connections to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, who then had connections to the Greek philosophers, who had connections to other civilizations around the world. So that, as I was saying, that they all had access to the same sacred database. So that shows some kind of point of connection.
Yeah, indeed. Do you think the Vatican has got a lot of documents stuffed away that people will probably never see, and they've probably got a lot of that knowledge buried, I would have thought. And it just makes you wonder if the likes of the people in the Vatican actually do see that themselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, you have Pope Francis, who is the public face of the Vatican. Behind Pope Francis, you have the Black Pope, you have the Grey Pope, you have all of these Opus Dei, you have the Illuminati. Now, members of the Illuminati from America have actually contacted me and attempted to get me to join them. You know, people from the likes of the Order of the Golden Dawn have contacted me and said how accurate what I'm saying is.
Really?
People from high Masonic degrees have contacted me and asking me to join them, all of which I've said no. But
why would you say no, Michael? Is there any reason why you'd say no?
Because my philosophy is that information should not be secret.
So basically it was just to shut you up, basically. Is that kind of what you mean?
I think when they start seeing people, now bear in mind that when you look at the lower degrees of masonry and the lower degrees of, like the Bilderbergs, and they are nurseries, and certain people are spotted in order to be taught a certain way and sort of brought through the ranks to certain positions. Now people, in high politics and whatever, are put there by these people to actually forward a global agenda and sort of a global politics. So I think they sometimes spot things in people. When you get talent scouts that go to, like Hereford Town Football Club and things like that, who work for Man United, they are talent spotting. And they're going back to the management team and saying, look, I've just seen a striker here at Hereford or Luton Town, or, I think we should watch him. Because I think, when you start saying the things that I'm saying now to you, and then the things that I'm saying to the audience who are listening, are not meant to be known. They're not meant to be known by the people who are listening. They're not meant to be known by you, and they're not meant to be known by me. Now, for some reason, I know about them, and I've pieced them together, and the people who are being taught this in secret societies, who are chosen initiates, are telling me that it would take an initiate many, many years to have the same knowledge base that I'm saying now.
Do you think there are others like you that might know that these exact same, well, maybe not these exact same things, but maybe similar teachings, or?
Of course there are. I've come across, quite a few that are coming across that they are speaking about the same salient points. They may have a different sort of take on some of the things, and I may have a different take on some of the things that they're saying. But nevertheless, we may be on a different buzz or a different coach, but we're both talking about the same station.
We end up at the same point, yeah.
We end up at the same point, but there may be, slight variations on how we're expressing it or how we're saying it. But nevertheless, there are a number of people who are there. I've not found anybody who's made the ancient connection like I have. I've come across people who have made this connection to individual points. Some people have made this connection to Stonehenge, but they've not made the connection to the Sidonian city, or they've not made that connection to the pyramids, or the Bible, or the Sumerian scrolls, or Atlantis. Even the likes of King Arthur and Santa Claus, and
funny enough, I was going to mention King Arthur, and
I was it's all part of the same thing. Santa Claus, King Arthur, Merlin. When we have the treasure map, the pirates, it's all telling you of consciousness. Now, King Arthur is really, again, a metaphor for human consciousness. So when we look at the word Arthur, it comes from artos, which means bear. In spiritual meanings of animals, the bear is innermost thoughts, and a thought is a consciousness. It's teote. It is the master of thought. When we look at Avalon, it means the place of apples. It's like the apple of Garden of Eden. Now, if your listeners wish to get an apple now, slice it widthways. Once you slice it widthways, it reveals the geometric shape of a pentagram. Now, a pentagram, the penta is the fifth element. It takes you above the four elements of physicality. It is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-wisdom, the pentagram. And that is the apple of the Garden of Eden. That is the apple, the Avalok of the King Arthur story. When he removes the sword is a metaphor for impenetrable knowledge. Now, Excalibur comes from ex cals libertarius, which means liberated from the stone. The stone is the foundation stone, which is the pineal gland. In other words, the metaphor of the story is only the chosen, only the selected can extract the knowledge and wisdom from the pineal gland. When it starts talking about Merlin is talking about the inner alchemy, the inner philosopher's stone, the inner wizardry within us. that is able to be activated to reach this God state, this Christed consciousness. When you start looking at Camelot, the castle of Arthur, that was said to have been built by the fire of the dragon. Now the dragon, the serpent, the snake is wisdom. It is the Kundalini wisdom. It is the dragon rider. When these initiates actually master their lower self, they become the sons of the dragon, which turns them into the Hierophant, turns them into the Hermetics. The Hermetics are those who understand sacred knowledge. They are able to interpret and understand sacred metaphors and sacred wisdom within shapes, within sort of metaphors and symbols and codes. So the whole of the Arthur story, again, when we look at Lancelot means godlike. Again, they are telling us about inner potential, our inner deitism. That is the King Arthur story, and there's other facets to it as well. But again, in essence, it's really talking about the inner awakening, or the potential of inner awakening within us.
So what about Merlin and Guinevere? I suppose that's
metaphors.
They are sort of just additional. So Galahad is another one, wasn't it? And Gawain. Yeah. Yeah,
but again, when you look, some aspects of the Arthur story, it gives you the 12 Knights of the Round Table. When you look at the chakra system, the chakra is basically an energy wheel. Now that wheel is the table. Now the word Mensa means both mind and table. So when we see the likes of Christ at the table at the Last Supper, supper comes from soup, which is to enhance. It is enhance this Christ consciousness. In this place, in the temple of God, which is the head, which is the mind, you find, or Christ meets with the 12 disciples, which are the 12 cranial nerves, which are the 12 messengers of the brain that communicate to the rest of the body. That is the 12 Knights of the King Arthur story of the Round Table. It's basically, in a lot of respects, the only thing that has changed are the characters, or the names of the characters. The message has always remained the same, and that message is part of the ancient code, the ancient blueprint. So King Arthur is now different to Santa Claus, which is all about the cognitive functions of the brain, how that consciousness goes down the chimney, which is the top of the skull, goes all the way down into the brain. It's all to do with consciousness. And when you look at the likes of Treasure Island, which was actually written by Robert Louis Stevenson, who was a theosophist. He was part of the Theosophical Societies. And what he's telling us, when you look at the likes of Treasure Island, and he talks about black dot and things like that, the black dot is the Egyptian version of the Hindu bindi, which is that circle that they put on their forehead, which marks the spot of the pineal gland. So that is really the atom in Egypt. That is the black dot. That is the black spot of Treasure Island. When you start looking at the gold, the treasure, the pieces of 8, the pieces of 8 are the 8 consciousnesses, and the treasure is the gold, which is the Philosopher's Stone, which is the alchemical ascension. When you start looking at X, marks the spot. X is the optic chasism, which is where the Christ is crucified. It is the 2 bones of the skull and crossbones. It marks the spot. It marks where the treasure is. It marks where the inner illumination is. When you look at the secret society of the skull and crossbones, and you see the number at the bottom, 322, and you see the skull, and you see the 2 bones crossing. Well, the 2 bones crossing again is the union of opposites, and also the optic chasism. But there are 22 bones in the human skull. The human skull, the Galilee, the Golgotha, the walls of Jericho, it's all the same thing. It's the human skull. But there are 22 bones in the skull. The skull, the head, is where we get the light to reach enlightenment. Now, the number 22 is on the 3rd octave. That gives us the 322 of the skull and crossbones motif. It's talking about inner enlightenment, which is what these secret societies are teaching their initiates.
Wow, that's just blown me away on that. That's amazing. I bow down to your knowledge, Michael. That's amazing. It's I'm actually just completely blown away with it. What can you tell us about the Sphinx, for instance? What are the meanings behind why it was shaped the way it was, or?
Okay. Well, the Sphinx, the lion. When you look at the priests of the mystery schools of Egypt, they were known as the lions. They were the holders of solar knowledge, solar consciousness, and the lion is associated with the sun. So when we approach the Sphinx, which again has high significance in geometry, and if you just remind me in a moment, I'll go into the number 153, and that's really significant as well as a master initiate. But when you approach the Sphinx, it is basically the Judah. Now, a Judah is a young lion. When you look at the Hebrew word, the word Judah connects you to two Hebrew words, which is Daleth and Dath. Daleth is doorway, and Dath is knowledge. So when you go through the Sphinx, through the pores of the Sphinx into the subterranean chambers, you are entering the doorway of knowledge, or the doorway to knowledge. You then start to become an initiate. You go through certain levels of initiation within the pyramids. Now, geometrically, the pyramid is the most stable shape. It is a three-dimensional triangle, and triangle is the shape of consciousness. So you have pyramidal neurons in the brain which deal with consciousness. They are pyramid shaped. When water reaches a point of consciousness, it becomes the shape of a tetrahedron. So it's really a symbol of consciousness. So you are really entering the guardian of knowledge. You are entering through the doorway of knowledge into the initiation chambers of the pyramid. Now, the number 153 and sacred geometry comes deeply into it as well. So 153, if you remember, when Christ was resurrected, he assisted the disciples to catch 153 fish. Now, the number 153 is the number of sacred knowledge, but also the master of the net, the master initiate. Now, the net is really the flow of life. It is the geometry of everything in the universe. Now, only the initiate that can understand geometry can navigate the net. The uninitiated will get stuck in that net. So 153, the net, the master of the net, has relevance to Christ. When you start looking at the Vesica Piscis, and you look at the inner ring, the Vesica Piscis, which is a symbol of the yoni, the female genitalia, it has a ratio of 153. Now, when you start looking at Mary Magdalene, the name Mary Magdalene, when you translate it into Greece, in gematria, which is the numerical value of letters and word, it equals 153. So therefore it is the Christ Hail Sophia. Mary Magdalene is 153. It is the yoni, it is the Vesica Piscis. When you start taking the 153 to Egypt, and you go to the entrance of the Great Pyramid, it's on the 17th course level. Now, the significance of that is if you add up all the numbers from 1 to 17, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way to 17, it equals 153. If you get 17 and you times it by 9, the number of pyramids, it equals 153. When you go inside the Grand Gallery, it is 153 feet long. There are 153 steps. So we're talking about master initiate. We are talking about sacred knowledge that is written mathematically and geometrically within all of these monuments. So the Sphinx is the doorway to knowledge. It is the guardian of knowledge. It faces east, which again, in cardinal points, is the direction of illumination and enlightenment.
Indeed, yes. Too much there to be coincidence, isn't there? It's
certainly not coincidence. I mean, it goes on and goes on and goes on. So it goes beyond the realms of any coincidence.
That's fascinating. What about the connections between like the Far East, and then we go down to America, the South America, with the ancient Aztecs and their pyramids? Do you think there's any connections between the people that taught them and the people that taught the Egyptians?
Absolutely, there's no difference. When you look at, if you get a map and you pinpoint every location of every pyramid on planet Earth, it's a star map. It becomes a star map. And again, they all had access to the same knowledge base. Now the pyramid is consciousness. When you look at the Mayan pyramid in Tikal, as I was saying last week, Tikal comes from Tika, which means pineal gland. That gives us Vatica, Tika, the pineal gland, and that's why there's so many pine cone statues around Vatican City. It is no different. South America, Quetzalcoatl, Kulkakan. Quetzalcoatl means precious serpent. Kulkakan, its alternative name, means a sacred serpent at the coccyx, which is the base of the spine. It's Kundalini awakening. It's no different, regardless of the location on Earth, regardless of the shape of the monument. The message is the same. Sometimes the characters have changed. The names of the characters have changed. You know, the Babylonian Semiramis is Isis. The Babylonian Nimrod is Horus. The characters, the names of them have changed, but the message and the metaphor remains the same.
It's fascinating. I don't know if I'm interested in the stone tape theory. I don't know how you feel about that. You know, when we see ghosts or what we might perceive as aliens even, like when stones record, an ancient thing and you might see a replay of it. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, certainly crystalline stones do record information, they do transmit information, and you are able to communicate with stones. The same as, you know, when you look at the likes of the altar stone within Stonehenge, and people ask why is the altar stone off centre? It's off centre because the altar stone of Stonehenge is built directly above what is known as a yin aquifer, which is basically a holy well, which is Earth's waters. Now, Earth's waters, sacred waters, act as a tape recorder for information recorded at that ancient site. And that is why a lot of these ancient sites are not only built on magnetic ley lines, because again, magnetic energy gives you a sort of a sound correlation, but they're also built on yin aquifers, which is feminine earth water. So there are recording facilities. Now, the information stored in Earth's waters can also be stored in human waters. Now, there are codes and languages stored in the waters of the body, which are deciphered and encoded by hydrohaluric acids within us. The human body is a 3 billion letter code, which is our DNA makeup, which is our blueprint. Can stones record the past? Yes, they can. What are ghosts? Some people call it an Akashic record, but the universe has a memory. The universe never forgets everything that happens. There is a fingerprint, there is a remnant of everything somewhere that is never forgotten. And when you start looking at spirits, when you start looking at what it's like to be human, you know, do things end when the physical ends? No. You know, there is proof in certain scientific sectors that prove that there is a soul, that have recorded the weight of the soul as it leaves the human body upon death. You know, that there are certain aspects of us that are simply energy. Now, energy, as a matter of physics, as a matter of science, as a matter of fact, cannot die. It can be changed, it can be reshaped, but it cannot be extinguished, it cannot die. Now, bear in mind that the universe is energy, and bear in mind that everything that's created within the universe is also energy, including us. Now, if energy can't die and we are energy, there has to be a remnant of that aspect of ourself somewhere in the memory of the greater universe. And I do think that is a viable argument to suggest that ghosts are a remnant, a conscious remnant of that former physicality. And I do think that they gravitate to a vibration where they're compatible and where they're comfortable. And I do think that would sort of scientifically answer what a ghost may be. I've had too many experiences of shadow people walking past, shadow people walking through walls in my house, to realise that, you know, physicality is the only thing. It isn't. And I do think that the universe does have a memory, and I do think that the things that we sometimes catch a glimpse of on a different frequency to our normal spectrum are in existence and coexist alongside us.
Because quite often they don't seem to realise that we are there either, do they? They seem to be reenacting or continuing their life without even noticing us being there. And then you get other ghosts that will react to our presences.
Well, I've certainly seen spirits of famous historical characters, and as I've been looking at them, they've been looking at me. Now my immediate thought is, what is he thinking? Am I a time traveller? Does he realize? There's all there's these thousands of thoughts going in my head in that split second.
Or is he seeing you as a maybe as your force, your life force, for instance, in a different being? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, who knows? I mean, the only certainty is that he is actually seeing me because we are looking in each other's eyes. So he's seeing me and I'm seeing him, and I know what I'm thinking, but I'm thinking, what is he thinking? Yeah. Am I a time traveller? I've seen the spirits of animals that have passed, but I've just seen them as a ball of light.
Right.
And at the exact same time that I've seen them as a ball of light, independently, people who I've been with have actually seen them as a spirit. So I guess it depends at what depth you've actually seen these entities as to what actually comes back to you.
Yeah. I suppose it could boil down to the height of your psychic abilities, maybe even. I don't know. It's because I think we've all got it in us, but I don't think I've got much of it because I don't really see much of anything. But you do sense things. I mean, everyone gets these senses, don't they? But I don't think everyone can see. I've never seen spirit, but I've experienced things. It's quite a fascinating subject.
Well, it is, and you know very well when for people who have never experienced anything, it's difficult to imagine anything you have no experience of. But when you've experienced it, sometimes words are inadequate. Yeah. So sometimes the words aren't sufficient to describe what you've experienced.
It's so difficult
you just know.
Yeah, it's so difficult to describe something. I was at a ghost hunt just a couple of weeks ago, and I was seeing mag-like torches sitting with nobody touching them, going on and coming off and going off. And there's no explanation for that apart from they were being asked to from the other side, and it's just weird.
Well, it is. But and when you've seen it and when you've experienced it, when you've smelt it, when you've felt it, you know that there is something else in existence. Even if you don't know what that is, you know there's something else around you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that could lead us on to reincarnation. What are your thoughts on reincarnation? Do we come back sometimes, or? Well,
there's lots of people, credible people that I've spoken to, that have told me that they've had past lives. Now that there's children who have been regressed, and they've taken the scientists and the people who are interviewing them to remote locations that are no longer inhabitable, and they've mentioned things and patterns and stuff that are underground, they're covered up. Now, how can they know unless they've been there? Where I've seen people coming back from out of body experience. I've seen people leave their body as part of an out of body experience. So if we have an aspect of ourselves that can come and go and that can live on, why can't it come on and live on as something else, as another being, as another person in the future?
Indeed, yeah.
Now, my opinion, having had now 10 years of constant daily experience of some kind, that anything is possible and anything is probable.
Is there any sort of a primary factor that drives you, that keeps you motivated in your research and investigations?
I think one, I certainly have a burning desire to know and to learn and to piece things together and to actually understand things, to understand the world, to understand the great minds of the past, to understand why do people celebrate the likes of Christmas, why do we believe in stories, what are the true origins. Even as a young child of 6 and 7, I was having sort of adult conversations with myself, feeling almost to the point of isolation because I felt different, because I felt I didn't belong. And, I used to watch biblical films such as the Ten Commandments and sit there, again at the age of 6 and 7 and 8, did these things really happen? Was there a Moses? Is it possible scientifically for someone to be able to part the Red Sea? And of course, no, it didn't happen physically, it happens genetically. But having these adult conversations at such a young age I suppose it sort of built a foundation for that driving force for me wanting to know the secrets, to want to put these secrets together. And again, importantly for me, as a sort of Stonehenge yesterday, the absolute delight and the absolute, pleasure on the faces of people who had such a great day, being amongst these ancient secrets, this ancient advanced knowledge. And that to me is a driving force from a personal point of view, but also from a point of view of people who want to know. I spent a lot of the early years on this so-called path trying to convince the world, but then you run out of energy very fast.
Yeah.
And then I start to realise through error, through the hard way, you need to concentrate on the people who want to know, the people who come to you and say, tell me, because then I have all the time in the world for, because they want to know. That there is no point trying to convince the world. You just need to save your energy and help the people who want to know.
Yeah. Is that how you see your role, to try and pass on as much knowledge as you can to everybody?
It certainly is. And again, in 2010, before I went to Egypt, the wife and I were basically deciding where we wanted to go on holiday, and both sort of individually we agreed that we wanted to go to Egypt, but we both again individually realised that it was going to be more than just a holiday, more than just a vacation, that there was a deeper meaning. Now, a couple of weeks before we went, I had a strange email from a psychic medium who was based in Scotland, and she said that she had an important message from what she described as a spiritual council. I can't remember who that sort of was made up of, but she did actually tell us. But the message was, now bear in mind, this was a vacation that had been decided for us, that the message was, regarding your trip to Egypt, you will help uncover more insights and translate ancient knowledge brought to us from great distance. Under the Sphinx lies an ancient secret knowledge that will be added to your toolbox. Use this wisely for the benefit of all meaning past, present and future. It all belongs together in the same place. She then concluded by saying, you must absorb, accept, understand and finally know. Only then can you share and teach. Now, it took 7 years for that to come into fruition. But that was a cryptic message from a psychic medium a few weeks before I went to Egypt in 2010.
Wow.
Oh. And this is, I must add that this is a psychic medium who I didn't know, who didn't know me, who was just made contact.
Yeah. I've just remembered, off air, we were talking about, you got a recording of a sound, haven't you, that you wanted to play?
Yeah, all it was, when I again talk about the ancient stones, how they are amplifications and transmitters of cryptic code within sound, that when you go to the likes of Australia and you look at the Aborigines, they have a piece of equipment which is simply a piece of string with a piece of wood on the end, which they call a bora. Now, when they turn that round in circular fashion, it gives off a sound that they call the voices of their ancestors. That sound has a frequency of 5.0 to 5.2 kilohertz, but it is the same sound that is found in crop circles, which are also circular. Now, within crop circles, there have been found what are known as diatonic ratios. Now, diatonic ratios have an intelligence. They have an intelligent means of communication. Now, in the natural world, they are only found in the call of birds or the frequencies of whales, the sounds of the whale. They are an intelligent frequency that is not part of the natural world. Now, when you start looking at shapes and how certain shapes have sound, when you look at a snowflake and the beautiful geometry of a snowflake, that is really a picture of the sound of the surrounding environment. It is basically painting a picture of geometric sound. Now, the Greeks called geometry frozen music. Now, what has been found in various crop circles is an intelligent sound. Now, when you listen to it, I think many people will come to the same conclusion as I have, is that it is a communication. Now, when you go back to Stonehenge, what I said earlier about the phonetic profiler, which was capable of deciphering messages within sound waves and taking words and letters out of the frequency, you will probably see Benjamin crop circles happen largely around the area of Stonehenge. You will see that if you're able to decipher or extract words and letters from sonics, you will be able to translate this into a language. Now, let me just listen to some shapes of crop circles. There are a few. Different shapes of crop circle give you different sounds, but here's some of them. And then, of course, there are a number of them. Now, with each different crop circle design, it gives you off a different sonic sound. Now, spirals are able to slow down these sound waves in order for that language, for that information to be interpreted at a slower pace. Now, when I heard that, now that has been digitally turned into a sound based on the shape, the geometry of that crop circle. Now, that to me is the communication that I'm talking about in the likes of Stonehenge and the likes of other ancient monuments that are able to extract sound from letters from sound and create a language. And I think when you look at the likes of Nazca lines, which are pictorials, which give off the same kind of frequencies, the pictorials of the Nazca lines are a sound sonic language that is aiming to communicate. The likes of Stonehenge is a giant enigma machine that is able to decipher, and the likes of crop circles are also giving us these sonic messages that at some point we will be able to decipher. But the ancient wise ones, the ancient in tune ones, were able to record and decipher communications from the stars. When you look at the likes of, white horses on hills around Wiltshire and around the world, a white horse is symbolic of a connection to a higher place, and the hill is symbolic and a metaphor for a higher consciousness. We are being communicated by beings that are not of this world, but they've always been closely interlinked.
Amazing, yeah. Wow. Well, those sounds are really weird, aren't they? It's quite fascinating. Do you think all crop circles are genuine, or do you think there's a lot of fake ones out there?
No, I do think there are fake ones. I do think that there are people that are doing them. Some people suggest that the people who are faking them are getting some kind of download, which is giving them the shape in their mind in which to form. But when you start looking at, now I've been to crop circles, I've been inside crop circles, I've been to Wiltshire at the side of crop circles at night when it's completely pitch black, you can't see anything. I've seen night vision cameras set up all over the hills. I've actually seen live on camera a crop circle being formed, which was a gigantic flash of light, and then all of a sudden there was a pattern in the harvest. There's people who've seen plasma balls around forming the shape. Now, plasma balls are basically microwave energy, microwave heat, and certain people have actually found an intelligent communication between the plasma balls. That is clearly something larger going on.
Yeah. I mean, to my mind, it must be difficult to work in the pitch darkness to actually make out some of the amazing shapes and messages that have been sort of put into these fields. I mean, how you do that in the pitch dark, I don't know, but you know.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing, it's not just a pattern, but it's also the sacred meaning and sort of the esoteric, deep, hidden, encrypted meaning of that pattern. Now, I spoke to somebody a few months ago who was on social media saying, putting pictures of crop circles that he said that he and his friends had actually done. Now, I just messaged them and said, can you tell me how you encrypted diatonic ratios in your crop circles? And they couldn't answer me. So in other words, they didn't do it.
No. It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Because there are diatonic ratios, which are intelligent frequencies, not of the natural world, that are encrypted within the pattern of the likes of crop circles, and also the likes of the Nazca lines and all the pictorials that you see at Nazca.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not as if they're just in Wiltshire or the West Country. They're all over the world, aren't they? Crop circles. So unless you've got the same people flying around all over the world doing them, it's.
Well, again, you know, it's that centre of knowledge base that is spread around the world. Now, that proves to me some kind of connection between all of these remote cultures, you know, who are meant to have had no connection. So it is this database of knowledge, this database of deep, hidden, encrypted, universal knowledge. You know, when you look at geometry stimulates both hemispheres of the brain. Now, when you stimulate both hemispheres of the brain, and inside the King's chamber, you know, you have frequency inside the King's chamber that does the same. When you synchronize the two hemispheres of the brain, it enables you to connect to the universal greater knowledge. So they're either doing that, or they were being given this knowledge. Yeah. Now, I think they were being given this knowledge and taught how to use it and how to implement it.
And I think that's a tool sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think they were using structures that were here before they were, but they were being taught how to use them. You know, if you pick up a modern gay guitar or trumpet or saxophone, unless somebody tells you how to play it, you're not going to know what to do.
Me, yeah.
So I think, well, yeah, and me too. But I think if you have the teacher who teaches you how to make the sound, who teaches you how to make chords, notes, how to harmonise, how to tune up that instrument, that is really what is happening with these monoliths. They are a gigantic tuning force for frequency communication.
Well, yeah, it's a lot to think about there. Have you had any disappointments in your researches, or you know, is there anything you've been disappointed with?
I don't necessarily think disappointed. I think no. I feel very honoured. I feel very privileged. I feel very full of glee to actually know and to be able to get into the minds of the people who knew. And with each day, there is another piece of information that really enhances what I knew the day before. And you know, the day after that will be the same, and the day after that will be the same again. So it's not a disappointment, because everything, whichever direction I go, whichever angle I go at this information, and I do, you know, again, being 17 years of law enforcement, you don't just see something and just jump to a conclusion. That is a analytical process that rules everything out before you come to that conclusion. Whichever angle that I'm coming at this from, it's all pointing me to the same place. And as I've said a few times, when you have the same words, when you have the same meanings, the same metaphors, the same letters, the same numbers, the same sequences coming up time and time again from different places all over the world, in fact, every single ancient civilization of the world that is known to us, those metaphors, those encrypted messages, those numbers, those sequences are all repeated time and time again. That, to me, is worth sitting up and taking notes, because there's a message there, there's a connection there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have you ever set off on what I was trying to get at, I think, with the disappointments? I mean, have you ever set off on a path thinking it was going to lead you to an answer, and then you find that you didn't get the answer that you expected? Or
I've certainly set on a path looking for information. I've been diverted to other places, but I found information that has taken me to the place I was looking in the first place. So it's sort of a detour. I mean, once I actually read an academic science paper for probably 3.5 to 4 hours, and I was looking for some information. And at the end of that, in the last couple of paragraphs, there was 2 words that I've been looking for that scientifically proved what I was looking into. So I suppose it's not a disappointment, but sometimes it doesn't come easy. It can take a lot of time, and it can take a lot of effort. Sometimes when I'm asleep, I will get mathematical sequences. The last one I got was a little while ago when it was so prominent that it was something that I remembered. I don't normally remember dreams or anything like that, but this was so prominent, and all it was the symbol of a square root and the numbers 937. Now, when I looked at, and it took me literally half a day and a splitting headache, and to actually look into the real deeper meaning of the square root of 937 and what it really means, it comes all the way back to the hexagram, which is the ascent that represents the ascent towards the Egyptian godhead. And it's a terminology for enlightened consciousness, and it represents insight and wisdom and magic power within, and also unity, hive consciousness. And it also goes back to Egyptian royalty. So that was given to me as a square root of 937. It's taken me all the way around to what is known as star numbers, which are central figurate numbers that represent a centered hexagram. That has then taken me to Egyptian godhead, to wisdom, to magic, to Egyptian royalty. So that square root of 937 given to me simply in that form has taken me all the way back basically to the mystery schools of Egypt.
Oh. Well, that's sort of, that square root has brought us almost full circle back to where we started, isn't it? It's not often you dream about square roots, is it?
Well, no, I mean, as I say, it's not very often, and unless it's a specific reason. I don't remember many dreams. I don't remember many things that happen. I'll just go into this abyss and don't tend to remember anything. But when it is so prominent, when it's so important, then I will wake up and I'll remember it. But, if you just imagine waking up and all you can see in your mind and all you can think about is the square root of 937, because that is all you have. And, you spend half a day working out why you've just been given a mathematical sequence. Yeah,
because obviously those paths you've set off, you've probably been surprised by the results you found with all the connecting numbers and everything. That's by the sound of it.
It is. It is more of a surprise than, as I say, any disappointment. I do sometimes go off on one path, but get diverted to another path. But invariably, whichever path that I will go in whatever direction I go in, it will always lead back to the same place. Yeah. And it will always lead back to the same ancient code and the same ancient blueprint that is not only used in the ancients, but it's come through the secret societies and the secret brotherhoods and the ecclesiastical brotherhoods. And it's prominent but hidden within modern day society as well.
You've actually blown my mind, Mike. It's I'm going to have to get all your books now and really fill my mind with it, because it's been fantastic. I mean, let's just give your books a mention. Is there any? I presume you can get them all on Amazon. Is there any other places you get them, or?
You can get them all on Amazon, whether Europe, UK, or America. You can get them from a website which is www.michael-feeley.com. There's lots of free blogs on there as well with this kind of information. There's a free newsletter that people can sign up and get, weekly newsletters. So that's really probably the epicenter of everything. I'm also on social media and Facebook and LinkedIn and other places like that as well.
You are. I'm glad I found you. But it's been fascinating. I mean, what I'll do, I've got, as I mentioned, I've got a Paranormal Dimensions page. If anyone would like to visit, I'll put a lot of Michael's books on there, and I'll put links to his web page and everything, and I'll try and give you as much information as I can. I'll pinch a few pictures off you, Michael, if I may, to put on there for you.
Yeah, please do.
And it's been absolutely fascinating. I really love talking to you, and maybe we can get you back on again sometime. Have you got any more books coming out, or?
I've certainly got, there's certainly one in the pipeline. I don't know when that's going to be, because when I write a book, literally within a couple of months it becomes sort of old news really. It's developing that fast. I think the next one that I'm thinking of doing is called, the Real Identity of Christ, Secrets of the Codex Vaticanus, which really goes deep into sort of religious meanings and characters and stories and what they really mean. But it also, again, will touch on deeply how these kind of meanings have also come back from the ancient cultures as well, because it is all interlinked and not a separate subject. But I've also got lots of things. I did Stonehenge recently with a group. I'm also going to be doing soon some cathedral visits as well, taking people around certain cathedrals around the UK, which I do have permission to do now, having contacted them. And I'll certainly be pointing out lots and lots of deep esoteric meanings within, the actual buildings and within religion itself. And it may even extend to the likes of Easter Island and Egypt. I'm doing quite a few talks around the UK this year as well. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, well, I hope to actually meet up with you, Michael, at some point. Hopefully, if you come to my area, I mean, you're always welcome to my home here. Come around a cup of coffee. But
thank you.
That's all right. No, I mean, I really do hope to meet up with you sometime. I mean, you've actually got a book out called Stonehenge: The Secret of the Monoliths. If anyone's interested in continuing with that, there's several other books, but I will put them all on the site anyway. But I'm afraid I've got to leave it there now, Michael. It's been fantastic speaking to you, and you've been a fantastic guest, and you filled my head with numbers and figures and pictures and God knows what else. And then I'm actually amazed, and thank you for that. And
no, thank you again. I love speaking about this. I love giving the information to other people, and it's people like yourself that provide the platform for me to do that. So again, it's a mutual thank you and genuine.
It's been my pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much for coming on again, and hopefully, as I say, we'll get you back on again. Right there, I'm afraid I've got to say goodbye. Thanks again, Michael. Goodbye to you. Thank you.
Thank you. You take care. Thanks again.
And thank you for everyone out there for listening again. As I'm sure you'll agree, Michael's been fantastic, and I will put a lot of information on the site, as I say, for Michael's books. And I'm afraid I've got to leave it there and go. Bye bye. You've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and this is the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Please tune in again next week. Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.